jumping into things.
There you go.
So I have 3 children and I'm married now.
There you go.
So, you ready?
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks for coming, everyone. Really appreciate it. My name's Sean Cleland, and I am an attorney. I'm actually located in Mount Clemens, and I'm here today to talk about gray divorce, which is a term of art that really involves people getting divorced over the age of 50. And so I want to talk a little bit today about how it kind of affects the bigger world, not just the people who are getting divorced. I make a lot of presentations about how it affects the people actually involved in the divorce. But I want to talk a little bit about the greater world, the adult children involved in divorce, the grandchildren perhaps, and even friends too. And then I want to give the people who might be actually going through a divorce as an older couple some tips on how to lessen the harmful impact of divorce. So before I begin, I want to talk a little bit about the myths and realities of divorce. A lot of people have these preconceived notions of what happens in divorce and some of the statistics about it, so I'd like to bust those before we move forward a little bit. So a real common belief from people is that most marriages are most vulnerable in the first 10 years. I've heard that since I got married. And the truth of the matter is that actually today, if you're over 50, you're the population at greatest risk of divorce. And there's lots of stats here really to talk about that. It's the largest and the quickest growing demographic of people getting divorced. That's another myth. Most people believe that divorces involving people older than 50 are most commonly brought by men. I'll admit that I believe that was the case too. And I was surprised to learn not just that it's women, that it's 2/3 of all the older adult divorces are brought by women. That's a huge amount. I was surprised to hear that. Another common belief is that divorces involving people older than 50 don't harm adult children. And I give this a little credit, because you're about to figure out that I'm about to bust this myth. But I give it credit because people understand the real harm caused to smaller children from the divorce. That's something that is a big concern of mine. But the amazing thing about divorce is that we still find that adult children can be significantly harmed by these divorces as well. And we'll talk about this as we go forward. The harm is a lot different than you'll find with children in some respects. But in others, it's quite similar. So we talked earlier about how gray divorce is the fastest growing demographic of divorces. And why is that? Why is this occurring? I want to talk a little bit about that today. And one theory, amongst many, is that it's the baby boomer generation that truly is the one driving this. And why is that? Some writers have discussed that basically the baby boomer generation was the free-to-be-me generation, the one that was kind of choosing, in some respects, self-fulfillment over kind of the old duty of loyalty and lifetime marriage at any cost. Kind of I'll call it the Archie Bunker, all in the family kind of distinction there between the old traditional and the new way of looking at life. The institution of marriage has changed in many people's eyes from one where it's a permanent kind of bond, perhaps because there was some need from both partners to work together to survive economically and socially. And today it's considered maybe more of a voluntary association. And the stats do show that there's some truth to the baby boomers being more open to the idea of divorce, where 66% of baby boomers would rather be out of the divorce if it's an unhappy marriage, where younger adults, 54%, would disagree with that. So we end up with this kind of mentality. This shocks me. This is an actual billboard. That an attorney could think that that's a proper thing to advertise really amazes me. But that is acceptable today. And there are some non-baby boomer targeted reasons for this too, for why we have more older adults getting divorced. Baby boomers got married much earlier. You know, they got married. 22 was a common occurrence, maybe even younger. You know, that has an effect on longevity of marriage. Statistics do show that. And people are living longer. So when you get to 50, you know, you may have 30, 40 years ahead of you as we move along. That's a long time to continue marriage. It's a long marriage if you got married when you're 20, to keep going until you're 90. I'm a big Civil War buff. I read a lot about it, and the people who survived the war, they died, and if they were lucky to live to be 60 years old back in those days. Now you're going 30 years longer, so things have changed. There's also social self-selection. Amazingly, some studies suggest that divorce is socially contagious. So when people tend to hang out with a particular group of people and they find that there's divorce that's going on amongst the people they're hanging out with or socializing with, divorce becomes kind of accepted. People start to question their own marriage if someone else's question theirs enough to end it. And this is the most obvious reason of all of them. Second marriages simply are more risky. If you are in a second marriage, you are far more likely to end it in divorce than if it's your first marriage. And roughly half of gray marriages are the second marriage or maybe a third or a fourth. So you can see why all these statistics and reasons and sociology all kind of stack up and give us what we found today, which is gray divorces on the rise. And one more I should add, there are some stresses involved in being above 50 years of age that you don't have at younger ages. Declining health, retirement causes a real massive change in how people live their lives and think about things. Changes relationships. Empty nests is another one. That's a lot of stress on people when their children are gone and finally they're on their own. That explains a lot of the stress in that demographic's lives. So, unique problems of gray divorce and strategies to help deal with them. I want to talk now about what makes gray divorce unique from a divorce perspective, and how you might want to handle one of those divorces in a way that's different than in another divorce where you're younger. The first one, and the one that is most easily identified, is the financial impact. This is another stat that really sticks out to me. The gray divorce have only 1/5 of the assets of gray married couples. That's an amazing drop. That's going to cause some people who have been out of the workplace for many, many years in some instances to have to return to the workplace. And because retirement assets are an asset that is split in divorce, people have lost a lot of retirement income and they have far fewer years to recoup that loss. These all kind of stack up to a lot of problems and stress for people. So what's the remedy? What can we do to help people who are going through gray divorce, to help them with the financial impact? The first thing that I counsel people on is that not to treat your divorce like it's a legal problem. Sure, there are legal issues in divorce, but to say that divorce is a legal issue is to make a big mistake. Divorce is a financial problem. Divorce is an emotional problem. Divorce is a relationship issue between family members. And those three things combined are greater than the one other issue, which is the legal issues involved. So don't treat it like, don't hand over your entire divorce to attorneys and let them handle the whole thing and turn the whole divorce into a legal issue, is what I try and counsel people to do. The other thing is, you got to be smart and be prepared if you're going to be in this divorce situation. There are people, we'll talk about some of these people, they're called CDFAs, Certified Divorce Financial Analysts. These are people who are experts at financial issues, specifically when it comes to divorce. They can really help people to carve out a plan and budget and make sure that they can, get back on their feet. And we'll talk about them, and we'll talk about some other things you can do besides getting yourself into a contentious divorce to save yourself some money. The other issue with gray divorce basically is the effect it's going to have on the adult children. Again, we talked a little bit about this, but there's a big effect on adult children, which is a lot different than the effect you'll have on younger children. When an older mom or dad gets divorced, there's a tendency for that parent to need help from a child for any kind of social, financial caregiving, or emotional support that they did not need from that child before, or maybe not in the same amount. Makes sense, the spouse who maybe they relied on for that isn't there any longer. And so now the child becomes a source of need. This can create all sorts of stress and boundary issues for the adult children. The children's role really changes. Doing a little research on the subject, there was a few articles that quoted people that tried to illustrate the type of harm that was caused, and this quote really brings it to me. This young woman was actually really worried her mom was going to smash the car, because mom was so worried about being out of money or trying to start her life over again. That's really compelling. What ends up happening from the boundary issues, what ends up happening from the need to rely on your children for more support is that the relationship just ends up suffering. Research is now suggesting that there's a lot, the closeness basically is diminished between parents once they get divorced at an older age and their adult children, and this is most pronounced with fathers. Fathers tend to have the worst of the relationships after a gray divorce with their children. So what's the remedy for that? Lots of mental health experts will tell you that these boundaries we've talked about are really important. That it's important for you to listen to the children when the issues of divorce are being talked about. But you also need to maintain a boundary. Don't talk to them about how mad you are at the mother or how mad you are at the father. Don't talk to the adult children about the bad things that the other one did that they never knew about. Don't get them involved in your fight. That's one way of putting the children in the middle of it. And even as an adult child, that's a terrible thing to put a child into. And there are children who are going to want to know those details. I mean, why are you getting married? Or, why are you getting divorced? They're going to have to ask those questions, right? But you don't want to give them the details. Give them an answer to the question why you're getting divorced, but don't tell them it's because, your father has been overweight for 45 years and you can't stand anymore, or something crazy like that. The children won't react well to that. And the kids, they need to respect boundaries as well. And not only what they're listening to from their parents, but they also need to set boundaries in that they need to tell the parents that there's certain things that they can and can't do for them. They need to make sure that they're not being overburdened with support needs from both parents. They shouldn't take sides. That's kind of 101 of divorce for children. Like we said, be aware of the parent who wants to share details. There's a reason for that. They're looking for support and someone to be on their side. So what other types of impact do we have on children? Adult children, studies have found they're going to question whether or not everything that took place in the 30 years before, 25 years before, whether it was just a bunch of lies. Was that real? Or was my life, did I always just assume that everything was fine when it wasn't? And it cheapens their growing up a little bit. It doesn't have to, but that's a reaction. It's one plausible explanation that will pop in their minds. And as parents, if you're getting divorced at an older age, keeping that in mind so you can address that with your children is a great idea. Childhood memories are important. Like I said, they get cheapened. Reevaluating childhood memories in a new light can really lead adult children into a state of depression. Again, one of these quotes about people expressing how this made them feel. I love this, these words here. You accept as an article of faith. That's what the parents are to their children. They feel like they got the rug pulled out from under them, and that by getting divorced, they're breaking the very rules that they wrote. Of course, parents didn't write any rules, but children think of their parents as setting an example, which is, in a way, a rule. So it's that kind of powerful impact that it has on them. So again, having these ideas in your mind when you're going through a great divorce, for you to talk about with your children is a great idea. So, this is kind of recapping some of the things we've already talked about, but as a parent, if you're going through a divorce and you have adult children, don't assume that it doesn't affect your adult children. The death of a marriage for an adult children is really the death of the family as they knew it. We'll talk about ways of maybe trying to circumvent that a little. They're going to go through a grief period, just as you will if you're going through a divorce. They might kind of stay to the side, not want to talk to either one of the parents for a little while. That's not unexpected, that's normal. So giving them a little time is not a bad idea. And this last one is really important. We'll get to this in a little bit. Try, if you can, to make your divorce not the end of the family, but just a change in the family. And that should be your goal, whether, not everybody can do that, but that's really got to be an emphasis. This is another one that people don't think about, but when you're a parent, usually there's kind of a persona that the parent takes on that kind of is a blend of the two, the mom and the dad together. This is kind of a side story, but I wanted to get a new pair of glasses, and I wanted to get a different kind of frame for my glasses. I was kind of tired of the same old look, and I made the mistake of taking my entire family with me to go pick out glasses, and my two little girls insisted that I get the same glasses. Again, same look exactly, and they were so adamant about it that it just didn't want me to change how I looked. And it really struck me that this is how they see me. And so I think it's the same kind of thing here when it comes to children. They really see their parents as a couple. That's as a role that they play, not just as individuals. And people will change after a divorce. When that couple bond breaks, people are on their own. They can do new things that the other spouse never liked to do. The other spouse didn't like to hike, so now I'm going to go hiking all the time. Or my spouse wouldn't let me get a race car. Well, now I'm going to have a race car. And watching their parents change can really bewilder them. Here's another quote. So was my old dad really just kind of a phony? And this is the real one, or is this new one a phony one and the old one was my real dad? Either answer doesn't seem real appealing. So there's a real relationship issue that can pop up from that. And so I think this is one of these subjects where you got to talk and you got to be real honest about it. Is that, hey, look, yeah, I'm doing things differently, and maybe I'm engaging in hobbies or something I hadn't before, and say, I understand this is kind of odd to you, and admit that maybe it's odd to myself that I'm doing all these things differently now. But this will ease things and allow you some time in order to kind of readjust your life the way that you want it to go forward. This is something that has been talked about for many, many years, but with young children. Are young children going to be affected in their relationships with, when they get older because of your own divorce? I think this can affect older children just as much. At least that's what mental health professionals are telling us. That even if you're an older adult, watching your parents get divorced might make you question whether or not you're interested in a long-term commitment. And another one that's really a big problem is that, because we talked about the decrease of your income, remember, gray divorced parents have 1/5 the amount of money, basically, as other non-divorced gray adults. So there's less money to help them. And as we're finding out, children today need a lot more help for longer to get into the world. So sometimes this is kind of the reaction of the child. They kind of feel like they're on their own. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. So let's get to grandchildren. They're affected as well. But I would say the reason that it's not because the grandchildren are necessarily upset or taking sides, really has nothing to do with that. It's just that when you are getting divorced, oftentimes if the two parents aren't going to be together again for family functions, they're not going to visit the grandchildren together any longer and those types of things, you're dividing your time, or you're multiplying your time by 2. So now your son or daughter who has children has to see mom and then has to make time to see dad. People don't have that much time any longer. So it puts more of a constraint, or not, that's not the right word for it. I guess it puts more demands on their time than they have. And special events can be a real nightmare if they got to worry about both parents being in the room. I can speak to that from experience. I had parents who got divorced when I was younger, but even my wedding was difficult to have them in the same room. So it definitely has an effect on how often you'll want to see your parents later on. That translates to the grandchildren. They're not going to see you as much if their parents don't have time for you, or if they're too worried about the stress. So we end up with the cooler relationships, and that is more prominent with grandfathers than with grandmothers. So really, the focus, the remedy to that, the focus should be on the parent-child relationship. It's really has nothing to do with the grandchildren. It has to do with the relationship with your own children. If you keep that healthy, you'll have a great relationship with your grandchildren. And this is really the key to it all. Find a way to transcend the bitterness of divorce so you can be in the same room at the same time. Birthday parties, weddings, religious ceremonies like first communions, all sorts of events, baseball games. Make it so you can be there, at least be cordial together. That will make a big impact on your grandchildren's lives and your own children's lives. Another impact is on friends. This is really substantial and different than in the younger divorce categories. For adult divorces, gray divorces, a lot of these friendships are long-standing, 20, 30, 40 years of friendship, and it really can change things. Half of the friendships will end with one person. 1 in 8 the friendships will end with both of the adults getting divorced. That's a significant amount. Only in about 1/3 of the cases will friendships with both of the parents be maintained with a friend. And when you lose friends and you're going through divorce, you really feel alone. I mean, that's a real problem. It's a sense of abandonment. So we need to really guard against that, not only for the friendship's sakes, but our own mental health going through the divorce. So the remedy is really reaching out to your friends. Don't stay quiet. Don't keep it from them. Don't try and keep them out of your business. But if they're a friend of yours and you want to keep your friendship, talk to your friends about it. Reach out to them. And make sure that you let them know that you want to be their friend, that you want to maintain that friendship, and that you're not interested in making them choose sides. That's not what you're there for. And that will immediately put them at ease and allow that friendship to change as your circumstances have changed. We're going to, resist the temptation to make them choose sides. That's very hard to do when you need someone to complain to. But we're going to try and do that. And try not to overly use your friends as a therapist. I get great advice from my friends all the time, but if you do it too much, you're really going to affect that friendship in a negative way. So we talked about all the problems. It's like drinking through a fire hose a little bit. But there are a lot of problems that we can make better, that we can somehow kind of sand down so they're not so sharp-edged. And a lot of it has to do with how we go about getting a divorce, frankly. There are basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways of getting divorced. And I want to talk about each one of those and how it will affect how you get divorced. And it affects all these problems we talked about. Let's stack them up. The first one is the kitchen table divorce. This is where basically two people are able to talk together about the terms of their divorce, at least in general terms. They don't know how to put together a legal settlement agreement. They don't know everything about all the issues they have to resolve in order to make the divorce final, but they can talk in general about how they want to divide assets or how they want each one of them to live separately down the road. If they can do that, that's great. I help a lot of people in that situation where they, in general, have some basic understandings of how they want things to work. They'll come to me, and I will simply draft their agreement, give them a few pointers about things they need to talk about and resolve, and they're done rather quickly, very inexpensively, and they move on. Those types of people are going to probably be the types that will be able to be in the same room together for a birthday party for a grandchild, and are going to really maintain a sense of family for older children as they move forward. So that's a good situation. The other one is mediation. I also do this a lot for gray divorced couples. I will act as basically a third-party neutral between the couple. I will have them sit with me in a room when we talk about all the issues they have to resolve. I will provide them with attorneys if they need attorneys. One of the great things about the legal community today in Michigan is that it used to be that you needed to hire an attorney to handle all the issues in your divorce. Once an attorney got involved, they were responsible for the whole thing. Now, Michigan's changed their approach, and they allow people to hire attorneys for a specific purpose. You can just hire an attorney just to draft a document, or you can hire an attorney just to give a piece of advice on one issue that's concerning you, and that's all you have to use them for. So instead of having to order the 12-course meal when you only wanted the salad, you can just order the salad. So this is right-sizing the use of attorneys and keeping it a lot less expensive. So in mediation, what I do is I provide people with the attorneys as they need them. Do you need an attorney to provide you for advice on something? Great. Here's these attorneys I work with. These are good, knowledgeable people who aren't going to inflame the situation and try and take things over. Do you need an attorney for the whole thing, to be involved in the whole process? We can do that too. Or do you need an attorney just to take your agreement that we come up with in mediation and then just turn it into an official document to divorce in court? I can give you an attorney that can do that too for a very low flat fee of about $1,500. Very cheap, including all the filing fees. The reduced potential for conflict in mediation is significant. These couples can sit in the same room. They may not like each other. They may have a lot of arguments, but they can talk with me and I can facilitate the discussions that turn into a practical discussion. You see it, and I talked about this with the kitchens. I can go backwards. Kitchen table is control of the process. Mediation. Clients retain control. Why is that important? Well, you contain costs. We talked about attorneys. You're going to keep the use of attorneys to how you really need them. But also, you're actively involved in your divorce. I mean, you're deciding what is important to you. You're listening to the other side about what's important to them. And the result you come up with is something that you came up with. You didn't just give the job to an attorney and then just live with whatever they came up with. When that happens, studies show that your divorce is going to be accepted by both of you and you're going to move on much quicker and better from it. Another one is collaborative practice. Collaborative practice is a situation where both people hire an attorney. They're collaboratively trained attorneys. I am one of those types of people. The couple and the attorneys will sign an agreement called a participation agreement. The participation agreement is going to say that we're going to work out a divorce out of court. No judges, no going to court at all. It also says that your goal is not to try and take every penny from the other spouse. It says we're going to try and find a mutually acceptable resolution to the divorce. That's the job that you give to both of the attorneys. Find a mutually acceptable resolution for us, please. And that's what my job is. And what we will do is we will bring in experts to help guide the couple. Remember we talked about a certified divorce financial analyst? We include them in this process. And we'll send you to a CDFA and have them work with you, so making sure you're making smart financial decisions and tax decisions. If the couple has a lot of trouble communicating, we'll include a mental health professional to moderate the discussions and to meet with you on the side to make sure that communications are constructive and we're moving forward. And again, the attorneys are by your side the whole time and they'll draft the settlement agreement. And I don't think it's up here. Should have been, but that's not, I can tell you. You also retain control in the situation. No attorney's trying to take over your case, take it to court. You are the one having the discussions. You're the one talking with your spouse with the aid of your attorney and these other people. So again, control is something you maintain with collaborative practice. Some people will hire attorneys to just negotiate it out of court without the promise that they're not going to go to court. That usually ends up with positions that each side takes. It leads to those positions becoming entrenched, going to court, and the resultant loss of control. When people do end up going to court, arbitration is one way for people to resolve another divorce. But when people will use arbitration, or they'll have their lawyers negotiate, or they go to court, the basic problem with all three of those is that they lose control. I always tell people that the divorce process in a court is kind of like a game that you've never played before. A board game. Sit down for the first time and someone says go, and you have no idea what you're doing. But there's some guy sitting next to you or some woman sitting next to you who says, I played this game before, I'll move for you. Trust my moves. That's what it feels like when you hire an attorney in a divorce. You don't know the game, they do. What ends up happening is that you have no control because of that, and you have to rely on their judgment for how they handle the whole situation. That's the loss of control, and that's the problem with all three of these. The problem with loss of control is the expense gets out of hand. You won't like the result as much. And that's what I try and counsel people in great divorces. Save your money and have more attention spent on your financial situation and preserving what's left of the family heritage you've spent all those years creating than trying to turn it into a legal battle. The cost and conflict. So we talked about how much conflict's involved in court, arbitration, and lawyer negotiations. Well, it matches the cost. Some kitchen table divorces, mediations can be done for peanuts in comparison to going to court and hiring attorneys. Collaborative practice is more expensive because you have to use two attorneys. all the time, but it's still far, far cheaper and less expensive, and is also going to give you a better result. It's a no-brainer. Control, again, kitchen table, you decrease down here. You get the least amount of control with court because your attorneys are taking over, playing that board game, and over here, you're in control, and your mediator or your attorneys are trying to empower you to be a good decision maker and handle your own divorce. So, back up here. Mediation and collaborative practice, I'll talk a little bit about those in some detail. The benefits, again, you're going to save a lot of money using either one of those methods. Mediation or collaborative practice, save that money. You're going to save a lot of time using either one of these as well. It's very common for people who are going through a divorce and collaborative practice and mediation to get done in a matter of a few months. They don't have to wait for a long, long time, which again saves them some money. But I do want to point out that it's not just that they go fast. They go to the pace that you need them to go to. I have couples, in fact, a gray divorced couple I'm helping right now, who's wanting to go extremely slowly. Because they have issues they want to make sure work right. They really have a real delicate financial situation, and if one thing goes wrong, their whole plan will blow up. So they really want to, sell the house and watch how things work as they go along. And so we can do that. There's no judge telling me get this done or you're going to trial tomorrow. So that's a benefit too. So it's a pace that we can go at that really suits people. Toxic stress you're going to avoid with either mediation or collaborative practice. Life is very stressful, and add divorce to the mix, it gets out of hand. If you give control to the lawyers and the judges to take care of your divorce for you, you're going to add to that your life the stress of not really knowing what's going on very much and not having very much control over what happens. That uncertainty is very stressful for people. As we get older, we do worry about our health more. There's clear links between the stress and divorce and physical and mental health effects. What mediation and collaborative practice do is they try and contain that stress, put you in control, keep the stress to a minimum, and allow you to kind of transition to a post-divorce life in a healthier way. And I mean, it seems pretty commonsensical, but very few relationships are going to improve after you've sued each other. That's never happened to me. I've never gotten a friend after I've sued them. So what will happen if you do go to court is oftentimes the stress and the conflict that's inherent in litigation and going to court is really going to make it hard for us to reach that goal of being in the same room when our kids are getting married or when the grandkids are born. You need to think about that. That how you want your life to look in 10 years. Collaborative practice and mediation will force you to think about those things and keep the eye on those goals rather than just giving you a judgment and you figure out your life on your own. So it's important for us to keep those goals in mind, which aren't necessarily just legal issues. And again, the goal that we have is to put you in a position with financial advice and making you a good decision maker so that once the divorce happens, you're ready for it, you have a game plan, and you can move on with the rest of your life very quickly. Another thing people like is that in court, everything you do in court is public record. I have heard stories, hasn't happened to me, where adult children have actually got the records of the hearings, which are all transcribed, or the depositions, and they've read about the divorce, and it's caused a lot of trouble. That's probably not going to happen in too many instances. But then again, some people don't want their dirty laundry aired, or they don't want anything to be aired because it's a private matter. And everything that you say and do in a mediation room, everything in a collaborative practice setting will be totally confidential. Another great benefit to collaborative practice and mediation is that children resent not having a voice in their parents' divorce, and you don't want to have your kids in the meetings where you're dividing assets and having those difficult discussions. But in a mediation room or collaborative practice meeting, your children can have a voice there if they want to express how they feel. Their voice can be heard somehow in the process. And you can talk about in their meetings, how are you gonna talk to your children about this? What are your children's concerns, and addressing those if you need help trying to work through your issues talking to your children. So they can have a voice, and they can be a subject of the divorce in a way that they can't be in a court setting. And the parents really can work on finding common goals in both of these and developing workable solutions rather than just fighting. So it's a really great way to talk about not just the legal issues, but talk about the financial, talk about the relationship issues. So that's a lot of information in a short period of time. I hope it's been helpful, but I'll be here to answer any questions you guys have about collaborative practice, mediation, or gray divorce.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for your time.